Hello Brian, this video is from the session that we had yesterday for about 45 minutes or so, introducing you to the hair system specifically for the eyebrows in this particular case. And I went ahead and completed the project so that I can give you the rundown in this video how I did it and what I had to do to go through the procedure. And in fact, going through the procedure, I kind of nailed down more streamlined workflows than even what I showed you, although it was fine with what I showed you so far. Only I found better ways than some of those things. One of those is really mainly for symmetry and when to apply the surface deformer. With my own projects, I mainly had the surface deformer applied at the very end when I already had both eyebrows set up, and then I basically had the styling and grooming. Then I decided, you know what, I'm going to have to change the face and I want those eyebrows to go along with the changes. So that's when I did it in my project. So we were a little bit premature in adding the surface deformer yesterday, but it is still part of the workflow. So first of all, I'm going to go into a brand new scene to show you some of these things on something even more simple, just to show you how some of these workflows go. So that's just work with this for the moment. What I'm going to do is go to this shading so we can see our wire view, and I'm going to select just a strip of polygons. Okay, pretty much what we did yesterday. Now there is a left and a right side for this sphere, so I'm going to utilize this workflow but with something a little bit more simple. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to the mesh commands and then split. It's going to create a new mesh with just those polygons selected, and we can just deselect the ones that are already selected from there if we want to, but I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to go to the simulate hair objects and then add hair, and as you can see, the hair is being generated from the vertices, and it says this inside the guides that it says root from polygon vertex. If we select polygon center, it will make those as a strip in the center. But the problem we have is that there's not enough polygons to generate enough of these guides. So this is where we got to the point where we really did need to have more geometry. So the best way to do this is to go to the mesh commands, and then you click on the little tiny cogwheel for where is it? Right in front of me somewhere. Subdivide, there it is, right in front of me. Don't know why I couldn't see that. So we select on smooth sub D. I'm going to go for 2. Give me enough of those polygons. I'm going to call this left brow. It's always good to name things as you go, especially if you're showing somebody else. They can see what's going on with the scene. And the reason why I'm showing you on such a simple object is because we can get distracted with detail, and this basically, it kind of just really keeps your attention of what the focus is of what we're doing rather than the detail. So we've got this area now in which we can go back to our simulate hair, add hair. We've got much more guides on there. I still want to go for something like polygon center because I want to keep it away from the edges, and also I would move on to the next step, which would be to paint a map onto this, and you can do this inside Cinema 4D also if you wanted to, so there's no reason why you had to limitate yourself in putting it over into ZBrush, just that I like the ZBrush workflow. I'm going to make these significantly shorter. Something like that would do fine for now. And rather than me go over into ZBrush, we're going to go and do it inside here. So I'm going to go to the brow geometry, and we're going to change to our UV edit. The UVs for this are not really adequate, to be quite honest with you. So I'm gonna take it for the process with the paint setup wizard, and I'm going to let it do a new UV for us. So what we're interested in here is just really the brow. So I've got the brow selected, click next, recalculate UVs, optimal, yeah, and the serial material mode is absolutely fine. For now it's going to put it into the color, but I can still use this map for both purposes, the color, just so that we can distinguish where on the brow area we should be seeing the hairs grow from. And that's it really. I'm going to go for a 1024 map and then finish and close. So it's UV'd it. I wouldn't say it's optimal actually the way it's done. It's split it up, but that's fine because we still get the same results in what we're going to be doing in here. And for the purposes of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the head just so I can see the geometry here. It's got its main area that we want to see in there. So first of all, I'm going to fill this entirely in white, and then I'm going to paint with black. You can do it the other way around if you want to, but I've got into a habit of doing it this way now because as I explained yesterday, when you're doing painting maps inside ZBrush, if you were to fill the entire face or head in black, it's very difficult to see precisely where you're painting on. Whereas if you do it the other way around, fill it with white, you can see all of the shadows and contours of the face to be more particular where you put the different gradients of colour, the different levels of grey in there. So that's why I always go for that. So I'm going to go for a fill. And it's a filling of white. Got swatches there. And I'm going to go for a black. I'm going to paint black into here. And let's select our white. Just give us a little bit more of a tail there. I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker than what we did yesterday, just so we can get through this whole process. So I'm just going to create a little bit of a thinner tail there. Yeah. Don't want to grow anywhere else. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, right, now I'm going to go back into my other layout. We'll go to the standard layout, that'd be fine. So we've got that, we've got a map, we've got our material. Inside the material, you can see we've got this matte colour in there, and that's absolutely fine. And then we want to apply it to the hair object. So we go into the guides, and there's two places that we actually got to apply this density map, in the guides and the hair. The reason why we use the density map for both is because it will visually only allow us to style guides that are within that area. We could do with more guides really in the area than what we've got, but we can deal with that in a minute. You'll see why in a minute, because it will change the layout ever so slightly, sometimes drastically in fact, as soon as we make this active. So we go into the growth and we select the density, and this is where we can select the density map. You can also click on this little arrow, and if you go up to bitmaps, it will show you the ones that are currently in the scene, and then we can select that instead. Now by default you're probably going to have it the wrong way around for it to take effect. So what we will tend to do is we will flip that between what's white and what's black. Okay, so that's something that we're definitely going to do. We click on the map, and you can see here that we've got the black point and white point. We just need to change these numbers around. So the black point will be 1 and the white point will be 0, and then it will flip, invert the map, so it's going to be more useful to us. So if you find it not working, it will probably be down to something like that. Another thing is that you'll notice we've got these levels here. This is basically, it's going to take into account multiple grayscale levels. The less levels you've got, the more finer cut it's going to be as to the outside edges of it. So to get it to take action, what you have to do is you have to click on regrow, and what it will do is it will regrow according to the area, but often the case is you have to do the reroute first to get it initially inside the area, and then you can regrow that each time you make the adjustments. So what I will do is I will click on reroute, and it will try its best to get it within the area that's going to be for the darker areas of there. So let's go to something like polygon area and then reroute. It's going to try its best to fit it all within that area. And then what you can do is you can turn on minimum spacing, which I've got here. If you do it without minimum spacing, you can see here that you've got clumps all together, and then some of them are going to be scattered further apart than others. It's quite random, and you've got spaces where there's kind of huge gaps there. By turning on the minimum spacing, it will force it to have more of an evenly distributed distribution of the guides. So you can see here why it would definitely help if you had more polygons on your object initially, because it's going to try to get them within that area. And as you go up, we just go up there and click on regrow, reroute. You can see here these are the two main tools here. It's going to help distribute them out a little bit more better. I'm going to try to force some more in there. And then hopefully it should occupy only the area in which we've got those. Fortunately, none of the other ones really do it. We'll go for polygon center, I think. Take a minimum spacing off for the minute. In order to see the effect of the map, it will not work when you've got something selected like polygon center, because this is very specific in where the polygons are going to be distributed. In other words, it won't work with this because it's too restrictive on the map. So what we have to do is we have to be a bit more general with the way that it's routed by saying polygon area. It gives it a much more larger area to be able to use the map. So by doing this, we can then click on the reroute. The regrow will do it also, the reroute will do it. But you'll notice when you do this quite often that these are not very evenly distributed between the routes. You've got like kind of clumps in one area than the other. The way to get around this is to use the minimum spacing. This basically evens the distribution out between one guide and another. And if you bring this up slowly and keep on regrowing, what you'll find is it will have the effect of distributing it out much more evenly. If you go too far, you might not get the results that you're after. You can see here that I'm just bringing this down, and then it will allow them to come within the area. So they're distributed better, but there's nothing stopping you from going in there and placing the odd few here and there. So that's something that you might want to keep into account. So let's just try a few different versions of these. You take up something extreme. You can see here that it's just pushing them outside of the map area because the map just can't contain it. So it is a matter of tweaking it until you get it reasonably distributed within that area. So there's nothing stopping you at this point to take some guides away or add some. If you've got a few stray guides that are outside this area, you can simply use the selection tool from the Hairs Simulate menu. You can't use the normal selection tool that you would normally use. You have to use this one in particular. So I'm going to just open up a few of these. We're going to need these, such as that. Won't need that. We will definitely need that. This is our selection tools. And I'm also going to drop out the main styling tools as well. Okay, so these are the selection types. If you go to live selection, you're going to be able to select the guide in question, and the guide at the moment is in point mode or tips. You can see here tips mode, not point mode. It will show the point of the tip but nothing else. This is one of the easy ways to select one of these. Another way is to go to guides mode and you can select the whole entire guide, but they both do the same thing. It just depends which one you find more easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into guides, and let's say for instance I didn't want some of these, I can easily delete them. What you can also do is, assuming that you've deleted any stray guides that may be outside the area, you can also go into the tools and click add guides. What I like to do is I like to take the radius and the countdown to 1 and 0 respectively for the radius, and then I can click where I want these guides to be. I find it's better off to have the interpolation on so that it will match the length of the hairs that are already there, or the guides shall I say. So I'm able to fill in some of these blank areas just so it aids a little bit in the styling side of things. You can see here I'm able to just fill the gaps in just for this styling aid, like that. The next thing is we want to make sure that the hair is growing from that same place. So what we do is we first of all go to the editor so that we can see the hairs, and we change the display from guidelines to hairlines, and then what we should be seeing is the hair come through. To make sure the hair comes through, when we go to the hairs, we've got this roots here, and it may be set to something like auto. We need to change this to polygon area, and then you will start to see these hairs come through. So the black ones are the hairs and the blue ones are the guides, and at the moment it's pretty random the way that it's there. We don't have to change anything drastic in here other than maybe the count, because it's quite low at the moment. So say for instance we put that to say 2000, and now we've got something more visible to see as regarding the hairs. The length at the moment is too long, so I'm going to take this down to say 0.5 or something like that. That's way too short. Let's try 12. No. 4. So I reckon about 6. That would do me. That would do. So now that we've got the hairs visibly seen, we can then choose to make sure that it's inside within the masked area, and for this we go to the hairs tab, go into growth, and then we select this little arrow where we can select the existing map. And then what will happen is once we go into there, click on the map and change this around, the black point to 1 and the white point to 0 if your map is the wrong way around. And then we will go back. You click on remove invalid, and then suddenly you'll see only hairs within the designated area. At this stage you're not going to have the guides in the designated area and the hairs, and this will then give us everything we need to start grooming the hairs. Another thing that we want to take into consideration as well is to make sure that when we start to groom that the hairs don't go through the geometry. So to do this, what we do is we select the brow, right click, go to the hairs tag, and then click on hair collider. Select the hair object again, and now we can start to go through the motions of getting it in place. Now there's two tools that I like to use quite a lot when I'm doing this, and it's either the move or it's the brush. They're the two main ones. The move is very handy for if you want to move all of the hair in a specific direction. I've got one of the guides selected at the moment, so I want to have none of them selected. So deselect all from our selections menu here. And now if I use the move tool and make sure collisions is turned on, it won't go through the geometry, but it will allow you to move all of the hairs in a direction. This is very handy when it comes to eyelashes, to be able to use this tool. So you can see here that it's pretty much pushed it right back against there. I'm going to undo this and I'm going to change the collision to something a little bit higher, like 0.4, and then it will push it back, but not quite against there, not quite as hard against there. So you can play with that and keep on pulling it up and up and up until you've got it exactly the way you want it. The other way to do this is to just start with the brush, which is by default in the move mode, and then you can start to groom it the way that it should go. So what I typically do with something like the eyebrow is I tend to push it up and away, and I would use the edge of this size of the sphere. You can see you've got this sphere and it's got this fall off there, and I'm adjusting the brush size with the middle mouse button, but you can use the outside of the brush, the very outside of the brush, to have a small effect on this. You could use, you can see I'm just using the outside of the brush and then using the main part of the brush to really just push them quickly into position. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to get them to be evenly spread out in like a fan-like shape. At the moment the hair's going straight through the geometry, and this would tell me that I haven't turned on my collisions for this particular brush. So let's just go back a few stages here. Oops, a little bit too far. That's better, we got that back. I just had to go backtrack. I used my undo key and I held it down for too long, so that wasn't too clever. I needed to have the move tool on with collisions turned on. I'm going to go for something like 0.4, and that should be enough, and then we just start to fan out this, and you'll notice as I'm going up, I'm starting to push it back. At the moment I'm coming from the bottom and then I'm pushing up, and then we're going back. Once you've done that and you've got it fanned out, there's nothing to stop you from going into, for instance, the interactive render region. I tend to do this before I go and start doing anything to do with V-Ray, because this is way quicker. Hide the visibility in the render for this, for both of them, so we can see what's going on. You can up the quality as well if your system can handle it. It's going to give you a much better idea of the flow, and as you can see here, the flow is going really nice. It's starting to fan out at the beginning, and then it's going at the different directions. So it's starting to fan out here, right there, fan out like that, and then it will go down like that. The next thing is that it doesn't necessarily mean that the hair is going straight up. It actually comes down from two different locations, the bottom and the top. And I found this especially when I was looking at some of the images online. If you look at this image online here, you'll see that the hair is starting to fan out here like that, and then it takes this rather drastic turn going down to the tail, and then you've got these other hairs that are coming from above at their roots, and they're going in this direction. So what I do is that these ones that are above is I will add these as a separate hair, and the reason why I would add this as a separate hair is because I want them to be more finer. What you can also do is you could do a thickness map, and I'll show you how to do this. There's another way of doing it. So let me just change the colour to something like blue to show you. There we go. You can see that now more clearer. So let's go back into here. So what I will do is I'll go back into my move brush, and I would start to push down just making very small you see that. We'll be dealing with the material more thoroughly in a minute, but for now I need to get that thickness so that it's representing it much more closer. So I'm going to double click on the material. One of the first things I'm going to take off is specular, because that's going to basically wash out very much all the colour. And then the next thing I'm going to go to thickness. 0.5 is normally where I start with hair, and then I work my way down from there, and I would allow it to tail off right at the very end like that. This is going to give us a good direction of flow. What I also like to do is, if I want the roots to look very realistic, is I would tend to have a knot inside this curve here. So I add the knot somewhere in the middle. You hold down the control key to add it, and then what you can do is you can make sure that it tapers off as quite thin to begin with. It thickens up in the body, and then it goes thin again at the end, and you can see here it looks a little bit more better in the way that it goes into the surface of the skin. You can get away with a lot more this way and a lot less hairs, but I'm going to keep it like this just for the moment so that we can just get the styling the way that we want it. Also to note is you can also go to the tint and give it an additional colour to tint from. I'm going to go to the colour here, and you can see here with the white you've got a mixture of different colour tones in there. So I'm going to change this to a similar colour tone but just lighter, a lighter version of it, and then I will change the root to be darker, the tip to be lighter but not as light as what it is at the moment, and then it allowed me to take that down a little bit. Just going to give me a little bit of variation, that's all. Okay, that will do. So we pretty much already got the eyebrow there, but as I said, you have the option to create a thickness map, and the thickness map is going to be quite advantageous to us, because what tends to happen is we get it to go thinner at the tail end. So for some images out there you'll see that it goes thick all the way through to the beginning to end. This is the case with this one, but in some other images you'll see that it actually appears to be thinner. This could well be because there's just simply less hairs in the area, which I think is more the case, but you can certainly go about it by thinning it out and keeping the same amount of hairs. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to just show you how to create this map, and then we can go from there. So what we're going to do is going to go into the material again. If you go to thickness, you've got this texture in here, so we can see what it does without painting anything. We can select something like a gradient, and we'll get this to, and providing the gradient is working the way that we expect it to, you should be able to see the thickness change as it goes down. It depends how the gradient's been applied. Okay. So what tends to happen is black allows through the full thickness, and then you've got white, which allows through basically infinitely nothing, hardly at all. So if I select a lighter grey, you can see the way this is working, although I don't think this particular type of gradient is doing us much justice as to the directionality of the way that it's working. You can see this a little bit better, in fact, when we do it this way. You can see the thickness is with the dark colours, and the lighter we go down here, the more thinner things get. And then we do we reverse that so that we haven't got too much of a fall off too drastically. But a map definitely gives you much more control when you're doing this. Gives you a lot more control, in fact. You can see here it's got a pretty hard cut off there. I wouldn't normally be using any of these anyway, but just wanted to show you kind of how it worked. But this gradient can be quite unpredictable sometimes, because you don't always know the way that it's been applied across the surface. Whereas if you was to make a map for different reasons, specifically on the geometry, like we did with the density map, then things turn out a little bit different. And I'll show you this in a map that I've already created. So I'm going to just clear this. Okay, that should be fine. So as far as the other one's concerned, we want to have some variation in there as for the length. And by clicking on this is going to help it kind of break away at the edges a little bit more to be more realistic. So this is another good way to trim down the overall length as well, and then push in some variation into there as well. And it definitely makes a difference having that on and off. The density map, this does pretty much the same thing as what it does inside the hair object. It does exactly the same thing. I found that whenever I've dropped a map into there, it does the same thing as applying it to the hair density from the hair object itself. Clumping, this could be a tricky one. You can get some mixed results with this. The key I found with the clumping is to make sure that you've got enough clumping across the distributed surface. So what I would tend to do is I would take the count up to 100%. I would have the clumping strong enough that I can definitely see what's going on, and then it will let you know how many clumps is on there. To start with, I would take variation out of it so we know what we're dealing with, and then when you expand the clumping field and you click on this limit, the lower the number, the more clumps you're going to have across the surface. So if I just bring this right down, see you've got multiple clumps now. We go down lower and lower and lower, and now you've got a bit more clumping going on to the point where it's not as noticeable, but you've definitely got some hairs clumping together more than others. If I were to take this off, you can see there that it looks very fine and neat, and then you put this clumping on, then it kind of making it a little bit more organic. Once you've got this set until you want it, you can then bring the clumping strength down so that it doesn't have the same effect as strength wise, but it still has the same effect as in what you've set up, i.e. the style and the randomness that's in there. There's not really anything else that I think you would need to do with this as far as getting realistic results, because it's pretty straightforward, and especially these days you've got basically people plucking their eyebrows and making them perfect and all neat and tidy, so it's going to be more CG like to develop these perfect eyebrows. Easier for CG artists than it probably would be if you was back in the day where people had quite random looking eyebrows. Although of course you would for monsters and stuff like that, you would have them quite random, I would guess. Now we're going to move on to the procedure of getting one side to the other with symmetry, and so far the procedure that I use is as follows. I'm going to just move these to my other screen for the moment to show you the procedure. So the first thing is we need to get the actual brow geometry to the other side of the head. So I'm going to bring the head back in, this kind of odd looking head. We need to get that to the opposite side. The way that you can do this is you can simply just make a duplicate of this, and you go to the mesh, and I think it's commands, I believe, or create tools, is one or the other. I sometimes can't see these menus. I look through them and I just can't see what I'm looking for. There it is, transform. You transform, go to the mirror, and sometimes this works fine, but you click apply and it should flip it to the other side. The key to this, however, is to make sure that your center axis point is 0 in the z-axis position. So to do this, first of all we need to get it at least to the object, our handle. So at the moment you can see it's there and it looks like it is centered. If it's not centered in world space on the X, then this is where you would go to here, press this little tiny button there, and then just zero this out on the X, and then it will make sure that it's in the center. And then what should happen is it should flip it, when you do the mirroring, it should flip it to the opposite side. You do have to get this right, however, for it to work. You can see here that's wrong. There we go. So it's Z-Y axis that flips it. This will save you a little bit of time. Keep on going through the process of using the mirror tag, and then baking down the mirror tag, and then deleting one half to the other. This way you've got both sides and then you're done with it. So that's that. The next thing is I like to make sure that I name it, especially later on when you get more of this happening. You're going to have a lot to deal with later on. And then the next thing is, if we need to get this hair object to be for the opposite side, I'm going to just hide the brow geometry for the moment, and in fact the head, and I'm going to visibly see just the right side. That's all I want to see. Okay. With the mirroring effect that we've got at the moment, it looks like it's done the cloning, so all I need to do is just double click that and delete the opposite side. We've already got one from the opposite side here already, so I've just turned the visibility off. We only want one for this side. You'll notice that when you do this kind of workflow that you automatically got the map flipped the right way around as well for us, which is exactly how we would expect it to be. The next thing is I want to just get this hair object here, and I want to name this brow, or L, left brow. I'm going to duplicate this and call this R brow. This is going to be our right brow. So in order to get this to the other side, all we have to do is we have to select the symmetry option, which is mirror, and it's obviously found from the simulate tab with all your tools here. So what we do is we click on mirror, we go into clone mode, we need to make sure that it's on the YZ axis and then click apply. And then you'll notice that all of the guides go to the opposite side. What we need to do there next is go into the hair object and then just change where it's linked to. At the moment it's linked to the opposite side. So what we do is we drag the right geometry in there instead, and then you'll suddenly see the hair appear. You'll notice that neither of these are actually rooted, so all you have to do is just select each one of them and then make sure that they become rooted. Before you do that, however, because we used the mirror tool and in clone mode, what it's done is it's kept the original guide to the opposite side. So all we have to do is go to our live selection tool or the rectangular selection tool and select the guides to the opposite side, because this is for the right brow, and then simply delete them. Okay, and then you're done. So the hair that you're seeing right here is generated from the left brow, which is rooted, for the left geometry, and now we've got the right brow for the right geometry. So we'll just move that close there. So the only thing we have to do now is root it. So we click on set roots and then click apply, and now it's set, and now you should see we've got two lots of hair that are mirrored perfectly either side. The next thing that we need to do is we need to be organized with this. So I'm going to select these hair objects here and I'm going to combine them down. It's up to you how you do this. So I'm going to press I'm going to select all of them and Alt and G to put them in a group and call this browse. Okay, and then you can get to your brow geometry and the hair objects within there. The next thing is when we look at the head and we move the geometry for the head, well, the brows are not coming along for the ride, which is not too handy. So in order to get the brows to come along for the ride, what we need to do is we need to select the geometry and add a surface deformer. Now, if you hold on the shift key when you do this, it would automatically get added to both of these as a child. And while they're both selected, you can simply go to the surface area here and select our head and then click initialize. Now when we go to the head and move these polygons, the brows will come along for the ride. This is going to be very essential if you've got an animated face that you want the brows to be moving along with it. And I found that this does actually work very, very well. I'm going to deselect the visibility for the geometry for the eyebrows from this point onwards, because we don't really need to be seeing it. So we need it rendered but not seen. There we go. Seen. Seen. Okay, that's fine. Now you notice in this particular case that we've got this low polygon object behind here kind of obscuring some of the hairs. Now if that is the case, there's a couple of things that you can do. You can make sure that the brows that you're making are some way off the surface, but then the next immediate thing to do is to make sure that you've got a subdivisional surface applied to the head. This sometimes will just cure the problem because it's now smoothing to the proper contour of the brows itself. You may also want to put the brows inside a subdivisional surface of its own, which will help conform it even more to what we're looking at. It may just bring it forward just that little bit more. We go for a render there and you can certainly see that we've got that coming through. We just view that and we'll make sure that, again, with these brows that we can see it but we can't render it. Let's just take that out there for the minute. Looks like it's rendering those cards. which it shouldn't be. Oh, that's right. Don't need to see them or render them. Okay, that's what we're going for. There we go. So we've got this now sorted. These couple of hairs, by the way, that are just in here, it was basically generated from the map that I created very quickly. But you can see here the overall style is absolutely fine. So that's really how you go about it. Now I'm going to go back to the object that I did, and I did this with exactly the same way. The only difference here was that I used a thickness map, and I'll just quickly show you this thickness map, and then we can move on to the next stage. So I've got my right brow selected, and I want to select the right material, which is this one here, and inside the thickness I've got this map. Click on edit and you'll be able to see this. You can see this. It's dark on the inside, it's dark through the middle, more density, more thickness, but it's very light towards the outside. And what this will help you do is have a thinner eyebrow off the tail end of it. And then when we go to render it, you'll get something that looks like this. You can see here we're able to get a lot more control. It fans out at the very beginning and then it goes off into a different direction and it becomes thinner as it goes towards the end. In fact, here was the actual render from this one. If we just move forward there, you can see there. You can also see we've got some lighter hairs coming from the top, and those lighter hairs that we've got from top, you can see them just along the edge here. All I did with that is I created what's called another exactly the same object. What I did was I copied one of these materials, so I say these hair objects, and renamed it called Fine. I've done this for each of the sides, and in the Fine I had a separate material, and I made sure that the thickness was even thinner. Then I just groomed it to go down. So if I just turn off the other eyebrows, you should be able to see this, and I'll turn the head off as well. We've just got these fine hairs. Let's turn off the peach fuzz as well. There we go. So these are just fine hairs, and they're generated from this selection set. So essentially you go to this selection set, and then you would, from a copy of one of these, if you're going to use a copy of one of these, you just need to make sure that when you copy it in the guides that you drag the selection set that you want it to be grown from into the link. And in this particular case, this selection set is called Fine Hairs Brow. Okay, and then you'll see there it is in the selection set, Fine Hairs Brow. And these fine hairs are just basically done downwards so that it merges in with the other hairs behind it. And that's all I did. That's really it. So that really covers the eyebrows. So now let's do something with looking at peach fuzz. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable both eyebrows and the visibility of these eyebrows, their lashes. There's the brow geometry. Don't need to see that. That's it. And we should only be left with just a number of things here. Then we'll turn off visibility of our lashes, and we'll get to them in a minute. Brow, brow. Okay. So now we're down to peach fuzz. Now to get peach fuzz, all you need to do is have a selection set which is going to be covering the main areas that you're likely to see the peach fuzz. I've done this very rough, as you can see, and I've made sure that I didn't include areas that I'm not going to be seeing in the render. And this is because you're going to have less hairs in the areas that you want to see because it's distributed over a larger area of space. So the more you can eliminate some of these, the better. So for instance, right through here, if I'm not going to be seeing this in the render from the back of here or the back of the ears, I'm going to make sure that I haven't got this selection set like this, so it allows the hair amount to be distributed over the areas that I really do need it to be seen. And then to update this with that selection set selected, I'll go selection and set selection, and now we've got more peach fuzz on there. As far as the peach fuzz is concerned, as to how we style it, it's really quite simple. You need to just add the hair as you would do normally, and then with the move brush you just want to style it, and you can turn on symmetry if you want to. You can use the symmetrical tool, and I believe it's in the hair options there. If you turn on symmetry, it will allow you to style symmetrically, but I don't like to always use something like that. It kind of makes things too uniform, but you could do it to start with and then maybe change it. So to start with, I go over there and I just literally spread it out going backwards, and you can see here I'm going down here and I'm spreading out more or less the way you would have topology, but I'm generally just pushing it all back, as you can see there. And then what I do is I go to the selection. Don't know what happened there. I go to the selection, live selection. There we go. And then I will select some hairs that should be shorter or should be longer. Generally the hairs around the tash area, the moustache area, and underneath the lip are going to be the longest. So I will select these and then use our scale, and then all you do is just click and drag, and then you'll see the scale of these grow longer. So you can grow certain areas longer and certain areas shorter by just either dragging left or right with this tool selected. So for instance, on the actual the wings of the nose, I made it shorter. And what you can do is, rather than have it maybe just suddenly cut off around the eyes, you could have it so you just make them very, very short around the eyes, and increase that selection set. You often see some peach fuzz as well above the eyebrow or below the eyebrow area, so this is something that you probably would want to add as well. I didn't in this case, but you may want to add that there as well. Once you've done that and you've got certain guides longer, what you can then do is just go straight to its own material. So I've got its own material for the peach fuzz, and you'll see here that I've got the root 0.008 down to 0 root to tip, and I've used this curve here to really make it fine. And in the render there, you should be able to see this peach fuzz, especially on the outside of the face, on the tash area, and on the end of the nose. And of course you can adjust this to how much you want to be seen and how much you don't want to be seen, but yeah, that's what I did with that. So when it comes to the amount of hairs, this is debatable as how much you want to have on there. I chose to go with 95,000 hairs. You need to keep the segment level low because they're not long enough to need any curvature to it really, so you can keep that quite low. And that's really it for that, for the peach fuzz. You also want to make sure that the colour is relatively light, as you can see there, so it doesn't show very dark. So now the peach fuzz is covered, I'm going to turn this off. We're going to be looking at how you do the lashes. So to create the lashes, we want to make sure that the geometry in question isn't in a subdivisional surface tag, or you turn it off at least. We then want to go to select the edge loop in which the lashes should grow from, and I estimate it that it should be this one here. So as you can see, I've already got it selected. All you could do is just double click and it should select the loop, and then control click to deselect the ones in which you don't want to include in this, as you can see there. Once you've done this, what you then do is you'll then go to the geometry tab or the mesh tab, commands, and then click edge to spline. And then what it will do is it will create a spline based off that. For the intents of purposes of this video, I'm going to bring the spline forwards so that we can see what's happening here. And I want to concentrate the handles to be on there. So I'm going to go to Mesh, Action Center, Center Axis 2, and then it will go there. Just so I can pull this out so you can see this. So we've got this spline created on the basis of the profile of the ring of the edge of the loop of the eyes. And that's really what we want. I'm going to leave it there for the moment, but before I do this, because I want to put it back in its original position, I'm going to go to the coordinates and I'm going to freeze all. Therefore, when I move it forward, it's going to be easier for me to push it back into place after I've demonstrated what I'm going to show you. What we need to do with this is we need to have the upper separate from the lower. And the way that we do this is we just simply select the points after we're making a duplicate of this. So I'll just show you what I mean. I'm going to make a duplicate with the control key held down. I'm going to call this left lash upper. And then we can go left lash lower. And then what I'll do is I'll work with one at a time. So the left lash upper in points mode, live selection. Am I going to want to select the points that are going to be for our use, basically. So I select my live selection tool. This is an upper one, so I'm going to delete the lower. And then I'm going to reverse that selection and do the opposite. So this one's the lower, and we want to delete all the upper. Done. We've now got the upper and lower lashes. So that's just hide the lower for the minute. We don't have to have anything selected. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new hair object for this. So we go to simulate. Just undock this. Add hair. More likely than not, it will be facing the opposite direction. What you can do if you want to have it instantly perfect is to reverse the order of these, and you can do this while you're in points mode and you've got the them selected. You right click and you've got everything to do with your curves. What you can do is you can reverse the sequence there, but I found that, well, there's no really point because I'm going to be using my styling tools anyway. So I'm going to bring this down here. This is going to be my upper lash, left upper lash. Okay, and then I'll use my move tool, look from above and just pull this forwards. Instantly you can see that it's way too long, so I'm going to bring the guide length down. Let's just try to bring it down to 12. It's still way too long, as you can see that. Let's just pull that out. Let's go down to 5. Oops, still too long. 1. Okay, that's more like it. So what I would do initially is I would use this move tool, and the way that you can use this move tool is if you go from a side profile, you can see here we're able to almost make it flow with a bend. So what I tend to do is I will bring it straight up, and then I'll move it forward so it has a bend in it. See that curve? And then what you can do is you can go to your move brush and then just move out these individual ones. You see I'm using just the edge of my brush there, and I'm just distributing this out, and we should be in points mode still. Okay, and the points mode, just to show you again, is done here. Oh, looks like I've just docked it up there. Okay, don't know why I did that for, but we should be in tips mode. It's very important we're in tips mode, because when we're in guides mode it has a tendency to undo what we've just done with that curve. So if you're in tips mode, you're able to get the edge of the brush and just fan it out without affecting the curvature too much at the bottom there. And then you've got this. Now if you've got any kinks in there or anything like that, don't worry about that, because in the brush you can change the mode from move to smooth, and then what you can do is you can just smooth it out. It works better when you're in the different mode. So we go to say guides mode, and it's going to smooth it, as you can see there. And there we go, we got the basis of the eyelash down. Now the next thing is how do we get the eyelashes to look like eyelashes? So to show you this, I'm going to just group this lot together, disable the visibility, and then I'm going to show you the one that I made earlier. So the first thing is the hair object. If it's not on there by default, which it may not be, I'll show you these settings. The guides need to have the root to spline uniform so that it's distributed across there. You need to make sure you've got enough count there for it to be able to go all the way across there, as you can see there. You won't need too many segments in there, so you can lower this if you want. As for the hairs, I've selected this to spline segment, and then you need to have enough hairs in there so that it's distributed nice along the surface there. Once you've done this, everything else is really down to clumping. So for our purposes, what I did was I enabled clumping in the actual hair object itself. You can see there, and I make sure that at the root it's got no clumping, and it clumps as it goes towards the tip. So that's the first level of clumping that we do. Again, you need to make sure to see the hairs, you've got the hairlines selected in the editor. The next step is to set the material up for this. So for the material, I'm going to select the material, lashes, and we go into here. We want to set the thickness up as so. So in my particular case, and in your case on the same model, 0.03 to 0.02, and it just tapers off from the root to the tip. The length, you want to have some variation, so you need to turn this on. You can see here that I've got like 91%, and what this will do is it will bring the overall length down, and then when you add the variation it will introduce some of the original length back, so you've got something that looks a little bit more organic. The next thing is scale. This works very similar to length, but it has a slightly different effect in the way that it works. You can see there I brought the scale down. If you bring this down, it will bring the overall scale down of what we've already got. It's an easy way to bring the overall length down. This length one here has a slightly different way in which it works, along with the variation. So I've used both of these. So with the scale and the variation, if I just bring this up, you can see here that variation will allow us to push some of those variations higher or further out than it even had in the first place. We go to the length one and we adjust the variation. It will never allow the hair to go longer than it ever did with the length, but with the scale it does allow you to push those variations longer. So what we can do with this is we can bring the overall length or scale down, and then we can adjust that variation difference between them. You can see there. So they're nicely used together. The frizz, you want to have pretty much non-existent frizz on there really. Just add a little tiny bit of frizz and it just pulls them apart just a little bit. You can see there what the effect is of that. So the frizz need to be minimal, absolute minimal when it comes to that. The next one is very important, which is clump. If you turn clump off, you'll see here that it looks quite uniform, and it's allowing the clump setting. I'll explain the difference between the two. In the clump material, what it would tend to do is it would tend to pull the hairs towards an individual guide, whereas when you use the clump material, it would tend to give you more variation, and it will go more by the settings rather than the guides itself, so you can kind of get a little mixture between the two. With the clump, what I tend to do is I tend to bring up the count and the clump to 100% to start with, And then I will go in here and I will choose a very small number. The lower the number, the more clumps that you're going to have across the whole entire area, which means you're going to have the hair distributed better. If you have higher numbers, it will tend to clump in smaller amounts, as you can see there, and it gives you a completely different effect. This may be desirable if you want some fake lashes in there, which look really, really fake and clump together. Other than that, when you go for the radius, what the radius will do is it will tend to pull the hairs further apart or towards other hairs. So this, basically, they should be really call this tightness. And you're going to notice this more so when you go for the hairstyles for the head. This is going to be acting more of a tightness. And that is it. That is really all there is to it. The next thing is for the lower lashes. What I did for this is I literally copied the upper eyelash object, and then all I did is in the guides link I dragged and dropped the guides for the lower lash, or the spline shall I say, because if you remember down here we actually have got two separate guides, one for the upper and one for the lower. And I can demonstrate this, in fact, right now by turning off the visibility of these lashes. In there, and turning on the visibility of these. So you should be able to see what's going on with this. So we've got the upper eyelashes based upon this. You can see here that it's not set up right at the moment, so we've got this spline uniform, and that should bring it across there, providing you've got the length right and everything like that. And they're out the front at the minute, because I wanted to demonstrate it away from the face. You can see they're there. We haven't got the hairs on at the moment. They are now. Let's bring this down to a lower amount. I think that's exactly the same settings as I had with this one. That's brows, isn't it? Lashes. So spline segment, I've increased the segments to that, and that's that really. Yeah, it's the same. We just got more in there at the moment, that's all, by the looks of it. You can use the minimum spacing. This is going to help you distribute it out across the whole entire area. I didn't use it in the demonstration for the original one, but you can use that, and it will help you distribute it more evenly along the entire area. The actual guides themselves, I've only got 10 on there at the moment. If you look in the original one, I increased this to 24. So if I just do the same for that, increase that to 24, we've now got a little bit more control. And then of course we've got the other settings in there that I've already explained, something like clump, for instance, where it's going to pull them together. You can see there, it's going to pull that together. Just bring this down so it's not quite as hard set, and that's it really. What I was going to explain to you before going through these settings again is that we need to duplicate this for the lower lash. So I'll control key duplicate, and then in the guides link we just drag and drop the lower lashes in there, and then they will appear there. The difference is that they're going to be facing the same way. So what we do is we go from our side view and we just pull them down and then just push them up, and you see here we've got this nice little lift there. It can be a bit tricky when you're rotating around this, so it's definitely better off if you've got it on the head, so at least you can click on a piece of geometry which is going to rotate around. Other than that, because we need a separate material, because obviously the length is going to be too long, We can use something like the length in here, or go to here as an example. Where are we? The scale. We can scale them down so they're more realistic to the length that you would expect them to have. You can also get the lash material and have an upper eyelash and a lower eyelash to give a bit of different variation in between the two. And that is really all there is to it. The next and final thing that I'm going to show you is we need to be able to make sure the lashes stay with the head, and we do exactly the same as we did before. Is we go and select the guide for this. We add a surface deformer, and then in the surface deformer we add the head and then initialize. This means that when we move the head, I've actually put a little tiny animation on this, in fact. Just to show you this, when we move the eyebrow, and let's get our brows back as well, left lower lashes and our eyebrow, there's our eyebrow, there we go, there's the eyebrows. When you have animation, you'll see that the eyelashes move along, and so does the eyebrow move along. And I've never actually tested it in a full facial mocap, but as you can see here, it seems to be working quite well, and it should be okay for facial expressions. Eventually, when you come to sort out the V-Ray side of things, it's simply the case of adding your V-Ray hair material, dragging and dropping it, and applying it to the hairs. There's nothing really else that really needs to be done, really, other than obviously going to there, selecting V-Ray, and then do your rendering. So that really concludes the hair system. You can fine-tune the methods that I've shown you. We're spending a little bit more time to get maybe the thickness a bit thicker or thinner, but to be quite honest with you, when I looked at reference images, there's so much variation in that. But I managed to get a really nice render from this. It's very clean. The eyelashes are probably a tad too long, but I felt that while I was doing this, I had a lot of control. So if I didn't like something, I could certainly go back and make those changes. So that will conclude this session. That was part of the session yesterday. It's actually 55 minutes in, so that's good timing actually. So yeah, thanks for watching, and let us know how you get on.